join James Creedon, who'll be talking royals in a moment. But I'd like to start, James, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With this criticism of one Rupert Murdoch and his various newspapers in Australia for their coverage of the bushfires. I understand this is about climate change denial.
Pretty much, if you look at News Corp, the Murdoch-owned company that really dominates the media in Australia, there is a consistent climate sort of skepticism across its various media. So you've got Sky News Australia, you've got The Australian, known locally as The Oz. You've got newspapers such as the Herald Tribune, I believe, not the Herald Tribune, but the biggest newspaper in Melbourne, also owned by Rupert Murdoch. And just one indicator would be the front pages. This was going back about a week ago now, but The Australian there, no talk of the bushfires, even though it was the front page story across media in Germany, the UK, other parts of the world.
You'd wonder how that's possible.
And, Mark, in the biggest paper in Melbourne, when smoke was billowing into the city, when towns all around were under in flames, the bushfires were on page 4 of the Murdoch-owned local paper. It is pretty extraordinary.
I wonder what outspoken Australians have to say about this, eh?
Well, there seems to be a lot of people who take on the idea that it's not really about climate change, it's more maybe about arson. Now, this is another front page from a Murdoch-owned paper, arson crackdown. Now, if you listen to what they've done in this New York Times article, they've spoken, amongst others, to Timothy Graham. He's a lecturer at Queensland University of Technology. He was also, I think, chief scientist in Australia, for Australia at some point. Now, he says that there are scores of bots and trolls online in Australia that are talking up this whole notion of arson, and many of these bots are also supporters of Donald Trump, and these bots have sort of joined conservative media like the Murdoch outlets in promoting the idea that Australia's fires are not a climate emergency but an arson emergency. Now, what this Timothy Graham points out is maybe 3 to 5% of the fires could be attributed to arson. The others are not attributable to arson, yet that's being massively played up in the Murdoch media, where the whole notion of climate responsibility, climate change being in some way connected, is being massively downplayed and ridiculed, in fact, across opinion pieces in the media. So this is a pattern that has been observed not just by the New York Times, but by, for example, Media Matters, a think tank amid ranging bushfires. Rupert Murdoch's Australian media empire turns a blind eye to the climate crisis. Now, just one final point on that. There's what has been observed as well as an echoing between officialdom and the Murdoch media that has many people concerned, because, of course, the media should be holding the powers that be to task, not simply coming in behind the Australian government and sort of echoing the climate scepticism.
Completely agree.
Climate change skepticism.
Let's now change tone and go to the storm in the teacup that is Prince Harry and his wife Meghan stepping back from their royal duties. They won't be skinned, let's face it. They'll still be making money somewhere.
Yes.
But clearly they are changing their roles. Apparently they didn't speak to Grandma about it, Her Majesty the Queen.
And that has been the big front page factor that has kind of grabbed headlines in the UK. This was the story that was on the front page of all the papers today. Queen's fury, according to the Daily Mail, at not being kind of kept in the loop. Megxit then was kind of picked up by both the New York Post, so it wasn't even just in the UK, but also the Sun. Now, apparently, according to some opinion pieces I've been reading more recently, the fury that has been spoken of is definitely being exaggerated somewhat, and there is an effort now in the days ahead to sort of bridge the gap and the rift in terms of how this was managed. It seems that Prince Charles and Prince William were informed 10 minutes before the announcement was made. Now, the fury...
One would have thought there'd have been some sort of a process they'd have to go through.
You would think so.
Clearly it's been improvised.
You would think so. Now, certainly the British media has been extremely critical of the Sussexes, as they're known. For example, but that's nothing new, Piers Morgan ripped into them, leading some to say, seeing the press reaction to this announcement, it just confirms why they're right to step away. So others saying,
Indeed.
You know what, the media has been so tough on them,
Piers
maybe
Morgan,
it's understandable.
One-time editor of The Sun that hounded Princess Diana. So Clearly there's a bit of a link there, isn't there? But,
That's right. And again, The Guardian putting, no wonder Harry and Meghan are quitting, the right-wing press and their families left them no choice. So there's a split, but I would say certainly stacked on the critical side most of the commentary is very critical of.
Can you very quickly do this wonderful Coles to Newcastle story about Domino's taking pizza to Italy?
Can you believe this? Domino's
It's amazing. I love this
They're
story.
going to open 800 pizzerias by 2030. There's already, I think, a few around. There are 5 in Bologna. I still haven't figured out who actually goes to them. And anyway, lots of angry Italians. A dagger to my heart, says Sylvia McCor, who is a Florentine and probably somebody with some taste.
Forza Domino, they might say. Or maybe they won't say that at all, James, thank you very much indeed. James there with the Media Watch. Thanks, of course, to Kate for everything that is business. Great to see you. And thanks to you for watching. Stay with us, more to come. Live from Paris.